if you are engaging in censorship, you're not doing science. Those two things do not go together. They do not. If someone comes out with something that's bad science, the thing to do is not suppress it or hide it or try to marginalize it or whatever. The thing to do is produce good science. So it's interesting when one side takes that approach and the other one doesn't. Kind of gives you a little indication about which side you might want to listen to a little more. Because what we had is on the Johns Hopkins website, a closer look at U.S. deaths due to COVID-19. Sorry about that, had to deal with some external noise. But anyway, this is a closer look at U.S. deaths due to COVID-19, published on the Johns Hopkins website. I think this is the thing is basically a student newsletter kind of thing. It's not like a full, peer-reviewed massive journal or anything like that. But this is based on a talk given by Genevieve Briand using data from the CDC website and compiling the data about COVID deaths and trying to see what we can really conclude from that, and just trying to kind of second guess what we've been told by the establishment, because that's what science is all about. Some scientists say, hey, I've got this. Other scientists second guess it. And then you have other scientists second guessing the scientists who second guess the first thing. That's how science works. That's how it works. Beware of those who interrupt the process, and that's going to be important in a minute. So, let's see. According to new data, the U.S. currently ranks first in total COVID-19 cases, new cases per day, and deaths. Genevieve Briand, Assistant Program Director of Applied Economics at Hopkins, critically analyzed the effect of COVID-19 deaths using CDC data in her webinar. And it goes into a lot of the figures. And what she was saying was, and this is really controversial, apparently. Okay, I'll go ahead and spoil it. Johns Hopkins has retracted this paper and called it misinformation. And we'll get into that. But anyway, COVID-19 deaths can be fully understood only through comparison to the number of total deaths. Oh yes, you have to look at things in perspective, in proportion, in context. All of that's important. Such a controversial statement there. So, she looked at total deaths per age category from early February to early September, which includes the period from before COVID-19 was detected to after infection rates soared. Surprisingly, the deaths of older people stayed the same before and after COVID-19. Since COVID-19 mainly affects the elderly, experts expected an increase of the percentage of deaths in older age groups. However, this increase is not seen in the CDC data. In fact, the percentages of deaths among all age groups remain relatively the same. Well, that's weird. Why would that be? I mean, if you've got a pandemic coming through, the pandemic kills people, but people are still going to die of the things that people were always dying of. They're still going to die of heart disease. They're still going to die of cancer. They're still going to die of car accidents, everything else. So, why is it happening this way? And she says, the reason we have a higher number of reported COVID-19 deaths among older individuals than younger individuals is simply because every day in the U.S., older individuals die in higher numbers than younger individuals. Wow! What another controversial statement! Old people die more than young people. Yeah, she's really breaking out the controversy here. Old people die more often. Who knew? Rand also noted that 50 to 70,000 deaths are seen before and after COVID-19, indicating that this number of deaths was normal long before COVID-19 emerged. Therefore, according to Briand, not only has COVID-19 had no effect on the percentage of deaths of older people, but it has not increased the total number of deaths. In contrast to most people's assumptions, COVID-19 deaths are not alarming. In fact, it has relatively no effect on deaths in the United States. Well, now, wait a minute. How can that be? The CDC says that 300,000 people died of COVID, right? So, to answer that, she looked at the deaths per causes from 2014 to 2020. So, basically, the way you want to do this, and I mean, any expert in this should be able to confirm it. I mean, you could read this on all sorts of websites before COVID, and I think I might have talked about this months ago when a lot of this started. What you want to do is, like, let's say you want to look at heart disease. You look at how many people die of heart disease, but you want to put that in perspective. Okay, so how many people died of it last year versus how many died this year? You should see pretty much the same. You're going to have to control for some things. There's more people, so you want to look in proportion to the population. You also want to consider age groups, since elderly people are more likely to die of heart attacks than younger people. And we've got the baby boomers aging up into those risk areas. So we've got, a huge kind of densely packed age population going into, we should be seeing, more heart disease, more Alzheimer's, things like that, more diseases affected by old age as the boomers age up. So, again, nothing controversial. There is a sudden increase in deaths in 2020 due to COVID-19. This is no surprise because COVID-19 emerged in the U.S. in early 2020, and thus deaths increased drastically afterward. Yes, technically, in 2020, the number of COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. increased by infinity%. That's it, infinity%. That's true. That's actual math. Yep. Because we had 0 before. You take 0, multiply it by infinity in just the right way, and you'll get the 300,000. Yeah. You do a differential equation, you'll get that. Infinity is so much fun. God, I love calculus. Oh, I am such a nerd. Okay. So yeah, you don't have any COVID-19 deaths before COVID-19. Then yeah, that's not a surprise. All right, deaths per cause in 2018 revealed that the pattern of seasonal increase in the total number of deaths is a result of the rise in deaths by all causes, with the top 3 being heart disease, respiratory disease, influenza, and pneumonia. And Brienne says this is true every year. Every year in the U.S., when we observe the seasonal ups and downs, we have an increase in deaths due to all causes. So she looked at the seasonal period in 2020. Here's the weird part. COVID-19 related deaths exceeded deaths from heart disease. But heart disease has been the number 1 cause of death in the U.S. for I don't even know how many years. So shouldn't that warrant a basic reality check? That COVID-19 should come in and somehow be the number 1 cause of death? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. Either COVID-19 is really horrible and is killing a lot of people, or there's something strange in the numbers. As Brienne compared the number of deaths per cause during that period in 2020 to 2018, she noticed that instead of the expected drastic increase across all causes, there was a significant decrease in deaths due to heart disease. Even more surprising, as seen in the graph below, this sudden decline in deaths is observed for all other causes. That's weird. Why would that happen? Why would we have fewer deaths from heart disease? That makes no sense whatsoever. And it says, this trend is completely contrary to the pattern observed in all previous years. Interestingly, as depicted in the table below, the total decrease in deaths by other causes almost exactly equals the increase in deaths by COVID-19. This suggests, according to Briand, that the COVID-19 death toll is misleading. Briand believes that deaths due to heart diseases, respiratory diseases, influenza, and pneumonia may instead be recategorized as being due to COVID-19. Yeah, this is an issue I talked about since this started. If you've got a patient who is just on death's door, any week now, this patient is going to die of a heart attack. And the patient dies of a heart attack. It's not a big surprise. But you find out during the autopsy, or maybe even knew beforehand, that the patient had COVID. Okay, well, did the patient die of the heart attack, or did he die of the COVID? Would he have died of the heart attack at that moment? If it hadn't been for COVID, he might have. You don't know. There's no way to tell. Or it may have been that without the COVID, they would have lived another couple of weeks and then died. Still wouldn't have affected the yearly statistics for 2020 either way. But how do you put that on a death certificate? Well, what you do is you say that the proximate cause of death was a heart attack, myocardial infarction, whatever they put on there, and that you put the comorbidities on there, and one of those would be COVID-19. And of course, what they've been doing is they've been grabbing and say, hey, these are COVID-19 deaths. Well, wait a minute. Again, if you're wanting to see what's going on with heart disease, you have to compare it to the previous year. And so what she saw is that, this change in deaths actually looks like this one's over the previous week. Between the week of 4/11 and 4/18, there were 1,190 fewer deaths due to heart disease from the previous week. Why would that be the case? Why would it be the case that all of a sudden you get fewer deaths from heart attacks? Well, look, they're offset, and all those other causes, they're offset by the deaths due to COVID. But remember the basic idea of doing this. When you see something like that, you don't attribute those deaths as being excess deaths due to the pandemic. They might have gotten COVID. They might have even died of COVID. But absent COVID, they probably would have died anyway, because you wouldn't have that kind of increase. That 1,190 people, most of them would have died of a heart attack that week anyway, because there's no reason to see such a decrease. So when you're talking about excess deaths, they need to be deaths above and beyond that. And so it looks like we've got a total decrease of 2,540 and a COVID increase of 2,561. So that would actually be, and I'm looking at that middle column there, the 418. That would actually be an excessive deaths due to COVID of 21, not 2,561. Because you have to consider how many people would have likely to have died during that same time period without COVID. But the CDC classified all deaths related to COVID-19 simply as COVID-19 deaths. Even patients dying from other underlying diseases but are infected with COVID-19 count as COVID-19 deaths. We've talked about this problem before. This is likely the main explanation as to why COVID-19 deaths drastically increased while deaths by all other diseases experienced a significant decrease. Because they really didn't. They just got shifted into a different category. So, Briand concluded, all of this points to no evidence that COVID-19 created any excess deaths. Now, this is not the same thing as saying that COVID-19 didn't kill anyone. It's just how many people COVID-19 killed who wouldn't have died otherwise without it. The excess deaths, that's what that means. Total death numbers are not above normal death numbers. We found no evidence to the contrary. And she said, if the COVID-19 death toll was not misleading at all, what we should have observed is an increased number of heart attacks and increased COVID-19 numbers. But a decreased number of heart attacks and all the other death causes doesn't give us a choice but to point to some misclassification. In other words, the effect of COVID-19 on deaths in the U.S. is considered problematic only when it increases the total number of deaths or the true death burden by a significant amount in addition to the expected deaths by other causes. Brianne mentioned that more research and data are needed to decipher the effect of COVID-19 on death in the United States. And she also said, the death of a loved one from COVID-19 or other causes is always tragic. Each life is equally important, and we should be reminded that even during a global pandemic, we should not forget about the tragic loss of lives from other causes. Wow, just coming right out again with the controversial statements. Yeah, that's crazy there. That's totally crazy. Why would you say every death matters? Wow. Such a big deal, such a thing to go raising the alarm about. So, and then you have a quote from Purna Dharmasena. I probably mangled that. Masters in Applied Economics expressed his opinion about concluding remarks. At the end of the day, it's still a deadly virus. And over-exaggeration or not, to a certain degree, is irrelevant. Well, I wouldn't say it's irrelevant, but it is still a deadly virus, and we still need to do things like things that protect the at-risk population. But I keep saying, targeted protection, let everyone else build up herd immunity. And that's how you take care of this. I mean, we've known this for thousands of years. We've known how to deal with this sort of thing. So, COVID-19 should still continuously be treated as a deadly disease to safeguard the vulnerable population. Absolutely. I don't know who could possibly disagree with this. I don't know who could possibly have a problem with it. But apparently, Johns Hopkins did, because what I've been showing you... Oh, don't tell me you're not loaded. Okay, there it goes. What you have been looking is the page on archive.org. Which, gotta love archive.org. You know, when you go to that page, they've actually got this thing up at the top saying, hey, it'd be great if you could donate money to us, because this year a lot of people have been relying on it. So yeah, if you got a few bucks to spare, go throw it the way of the Internet Archive, because that is a wonderful service they do. Their gift to the world. I really love archive.org. So definitely go and look at that. I'll link both to the archive.org version of this and this new version they've put up where they've retracted everything. So, this still has the same author on it, Yanni Gu. I don't know if she knows. This is an editor's note. I don't think she wrote this. I think someone else did. And Brianne has not in any way retracted anything there. She stands by it, but anyway, Johns Hopkins didn't like this. Didn't like what she was saying. Didn't like what was going on. After the newsletter published this article on November 22nd, it was brought to our attention that our coverage of Genevieve Brand's presentation has been used to support dangerous inaccuracies that minimize the impact of the pandemic. That's not an argument. That's not really saying anything. I keep saying this. You have to look at the difference between fact and opinion. Whether it's dangerous inaccuracies, minimizing the impact, those are opinions, not facts. So, we decided on November 26th to retract this article to stop the spread of misinformation. But there was no misinformation in the article. Everything in there was fine. But it is our responsibility as journalists to provide a historical record. Here is a PDF of it. Let me show you this. I'm just going to open in a new tab. Put that up. I want to show you what they did here. They have this. Retracted by the newsletter. Yeah, I think they've been seeing like too many spy movies or something that had this watermark. And look, it is on every single page. And it gets in the way of like you're reading it and everything. It's this isn't science. This is not how you do science. You say, okay, we retracted the paper, but here it is anyway. But now you've got this histrionic watermark on it. I mean, like, it's even on the last page, which doesn't have any content at all on it. Are they retracting that Johns Hopkins was founded in 1896? What are they retracting on that last page? I don't even know. That is crazy. That is histrionic. It is not in any way science. So, all right. In accordance with our standards for transparency, we're sharing with our readers how we came to this decision. And the newsletter is independent, student-run publication, and they're not supported by a blah, 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 all the disclaimers. Briand's study should not be used exclusively in understanding the impact of COVID-19. Well, no study should be used exclusively in the understanding of anything. We know that. That's a standard feature of studies. So why point it out here? Why single out this study as being different? It says, but it should be taken in context with the countless other data published by so-and-so and so-and-so. Well, then why did you redact it? If you take it away, if you censor it, if you say don't look at it, then you can't take it in context of everything else. So, what else don't you want us to look at? What else don't you want? You should take everything in context. Look at all of this data, look at all of these analyses, put it all together and figure it out. Apparently there are some that you don't want us to do with that. So that is concerning. That is really, really concerning. So, as Assistant Director for the Masters in Applied Economics, Briand is neither a medical professional nor a disease researcher. This is a typical dirty tactic that a lot of people do when they don't have a response to scientific data. They try and discredit the author by saying they don't have the right expertise. You can do that with anyone. You can do that with anyone. They can be an expert in what they're doing in the paper. Say, oh, but they're not an expert in this, related field. Well, of course not, because they're an expert in one thing. Why would she need to be an expert in disease research? Why would she need to be a medical? She wasn't doing any medical stuff. She wasn't doing any disease research. She was taking the numbers from the CDC, who had already done the disease research, and she was analyzing them in the way that economists do, because economists learn that you're not supposed to take things in isolation. You're not supposed to look just at COVID and just at COVID deaths and just at this and just at that. You just look at that. We're looking at COVID deaths. We're looking at COVID treatments, and we're looking at COVID survivability and this and this, COVID. Economists know that you have to look at the bigger picture, at the broader look at what is happening in relation to all of that. You can't just look at one industry, and one industry seems to be failing, but what effect is that having on the larger economy? Economists do that all the time, and they are good at it. They are really good at it. And so that's what she's doing here. She's taking these COVID figures released by the CDC, and she's comparing them, and she's doing kind of a big picture look and saying, wait a minute, okay, what is the overall effect this is having? And that's perfectly valid, and she is perfectly qualified to do that. So trying to dismiss her because she doesn't have the right expertise is reprehensible. You've just shown yourselves to be really dishonest, whoever you are, whatever editor or editors did this. You've just shown yourselves to be really dishonest. At her talk, she herself stated that more research and data are needed to understand the effects. See, even she says that it's not, even she says we need to look at other things. That's a standard thing. Most studies say that because most studies don't try to be the end-all and be-all. And most studies are there not only to look at the data and see what conclusions they can draw, but also to try to ask new questions and try to say, okay, what do we need to look at now to try to get better data and try to figure out more of what's really going on? They say this. I've read study after study after study that has said that. Now, more research and data are needed. That's not a bad thing about the study. That's not a bad thing to say that. So why are you trying to use it to say that this is misinformation? God. Oh. So they quote Briand. All of this points to evidence that COVID-19 created any excess deaths. Total death numbers are not above normal death numbers. This claim is incorrect and does not take into account the spike in raw death count from all causes compared to previous years. But that's exactly what she did! She looked at the... going back to 2014. She looked at that. I mean, yeah, there's a spike in death counts, but what could cause that? You know, when you say, because they say, according to the CDC, there have been almost 300,000 excess deaths due to COVID-19. Yeah, she started that in the paper saying that. That was her starting point. You can't use someone's starting point as a rebuttal. But they were saying that as if she didn't even know that, as if she didn't even mention it. In fact, it was the entire basis for her article. How many of those 300,000 deaths are new deaths, or how many of them are either misclassified when they should have been considered heart disease, or how many of them are not actual excess deaths because absent the COVID, the person would have died of the heart attack anyway. So that's what that previous year comparison is all about, and that's what she did. Additionally, Briand presented data of total U.S. deaths in comparison to COVID-19 related deaths as a proportion percentage which trivializes the repercussions of the pandemic. Oh my God, where do I begin with this one? First of all, we just saw it. She gave raw numbers. She gave raw numbers. Yeah. But presenting it as a proportion percentage trivializes the repercussions of the pandemic. You have to look at these things in proportion. Because like I said, there's other stuff going on. The population is bigger. And if the population is bigger, you can expect the numbers of all the death counts and everything to be bigger. Because it's a bigger population. And even among the population, like I said, we've got things like, the baby boomers aging up. Because there are a greater number of people in their age category than others. And so as they get older, we can expect these little spikes to happen. So what do? We continue looking at all of these in proportion. That's the only way to tell. And so if you're going to say that where was I? I kind of lost my place here. Yeah, trivializes the repercussions of the pandemic. What? You don't want people looking at it in proportion? You don't want people seeing it in context? You don't want people taking a realist. No. You just want to point at 300,000 deaths. And you want everyone to go, oh my God, 300,000. That's over 9,000. So that's what you want to do. You want to panic people with big numbers instead of putting it in proportion does not trivialize it. It gives people the proper perspective, which apparently you don't want them to have. So this evidence does not disprove the severity of COVID-19. An increase in excess deaths is not represented in these proportionalities because they are offered as percentages, not raw numbers. Okay, again, she gave the raw numbers. But also, again, the percentages are what you want to look at, because if they are excess deaths, then they'll show up as like this percent extra. There's 5% more deaths than we would have expected. Briand also claimed that in her analysis, the deaths due to heart disease, respiratory disease, influenza, and pneumonia may be incorrectly categorized as COVID-19 related deaths. However, COVID-19 disproportionately affects those with pre-existing conditions, so those with underlying conditions are statistically more likely to be severely affected and die from the virus. But again, that's not the question. The question is how many of them would have died anyway. That's what an excess death means. That's why it's excess. Because of these inaccuracies, none of them are inaccuracies, and our failure to provide additional information about the effects of COVID-19, the newsletter decided to retract this article. It is our duty as a publication to combat the spread of misinformation and to enhance our fact-checking process. We apologize to our readers, but you didn't check any facts. There were loads of facts presented in that paper that you did not even mention. What you gave was opinion and even invective and attacking the source, and you did absolutely nothing to debunk any of her analysis. Anything that she did. That's bad science, and it's just part of my bewilderment at what is going on here with people just giving it all up because we have to panic people over COVID. I don't know. Read everything with a grain of salt, people. Take Brienne's study with a grain of salt. It might be wrong. I don't know. But you have to look at all of the data, which means all of the data has to be available, which thankfully it is. Thanks to archive.org. Without that stupid watermark over the top of it, preventing you from reading a lot of it and making it more difficult. So, all right, that's all I have for right now. As always, hit like, share, and subscribe. Spread this video far and wide. And also, comment for the comment gods. Go down below, and maybe the comment gods will elevate this video in the algorithm. And of course, you can always donate at donate.bogosity.tv and support this channel and what I'm doing. You can become a regular at Patreon and Subscribestar and get a whole bunch of benefits. Just take a look at what's there in the different tiers. Or you can give a one-time donation with PayPal, or with cryptocurrency, you can just give a few pennies. And I've actually got something new going on over on this side of the screen. No, wait. This side. There we go. I got my sides mixed up. Right where I'm pointing, you should be seeing a QR code. And it's going to change every little bit. That's a new thing, kind of playing around with it. That's how you can donate in cryptocurrency. If you're asking me which cryptocurrency, well, actually, any of them. It's not the cryptocurrency that has to support this. It's the wallet. And this wallet protocol, and most wallets will be able to support this with just an addition of a single line of code. And so they've already got support for several wallets. You can wait, because unfortunately, this is actually made for like payment systems. So the payment actually has to be embedded into the QR code. But you scan this with any supporting wallet. So you can use the Bitcoin.com wallet, which gets you the regular Bitcoin BTC as well as Bitcoin Cash. You can use the Bitcoin SV wallet. The official Dash wallet supports this, as does the Dash Electrum wallet, which is the one I personally like to use. And there's also the Edge wallet, which is a multi-coin wallet, supports this as well. So just kind of wait for the right dollar amount. I've got everything from 10 cents to $10. Just wait for the right amount to scroll by, scan that QR code, and you can pay with whatever of those cryptos you want, or whatever other wallets may have added in this protocol. It's really nice. It's because otherwise you'd be saying, like, if you go to donate.bogosity.tv, you see I have the QR codes for Dash and Bitcoin Cash, and I think I still have Litecoin up there. I don't know. I think I might change that to Bitcoin SV. I'm not sure, but and then you can go down to Changelly, and this is what you have to do. You say, well, I want to pay with Bitcoin SV. How do I do that? I've got to find the right QR code, and I've got to find the right little drop down thing and do that so I can pay it. No, you don't. Not with this. Not with this. Hey, I pointed the right way that time. Not with this. Nope. You just scan it, send it. That's it. Done. And you're sending it directly to me. It goes directly to whatever address it is. If you send Dash, it sends it to my Dash address. There's no third party that's, that can take anything. It's not custodial or anything like that. So it's pretty cool. You might want to check it out. So thank you so much. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you ate lots of turkey if you're in America. Even if you're not in America, turkey's delicious. But we just had Thanksgiving, so coming off a big weekend there, coming on to Christmas, and I hope you're all going to have a great rest of the year. I know 2020 has been crazy, but things will get better. Things will always get better, and things are never as bad as they seem. So Always keep that in mind. And no matter what you do, as always, stay strong and be free.